When did you realize your parents were total hypocrites? You're 13 now, which means you can buy your own school lunch, my mom said while signing a permission slip one day. We're not made of money, and you need to learn the value of hard work. That's when she also stopped buying me basic school supplies. Figure it out, she said when I asked for new notebooks and pens. Other kids your age have jobs, so maybe you should too. I felt confused and embarrassed asking teachers for extra supplies while my dad watched his expensive sports package that cost more per month than my entire school supply list. They'd just bought themselves a new 60-inch TV, but apparently couldn't afford a $5 pack of pencils. I started babysitting on weekends and walking dogs after school just to afford basic necessities like clothes and food. The humiliation of wearing jeans that were too short and shoes with holes burned in my chest, but I tried to act like everything was normal. Look at our little entrepreneur, Dad would joke when I came home exhausted from working. Maybe now you'll understand why we can't just hand you everything on a silver platter. I'd smile and nod while calculating in my head how to make $20 stretch for a week of lunches. By 14, they'd stopped buying me food entirely while ordering takeout for themselves 3 times a week. I'd come home starving to find them eating restaurant meals and empty cabinets. You could get a job at the grocery store and buy your own food like an adult, Mom would say, eating her Chinese takeout. The smell of their meals made my stomach ache, but I learned to stay in my room until they were done so I wouldn't have to watch them enjoy food I couldn't afford. I got better at managing money than my parents ever were because I had to make every dollar count. While they impulse bought gadgets and restaurant meals, I researched every purchase and found the best deals. I started a small business doing yard work and pet sitting that brought in decent money. The irony was that I had more financial discipline as a teenager than they did as adults. But they still mocked me for being poor when I wore thrift store clothes. It's embarrassing having a daughter who dresses like she's homeless, Mom said when I wore a secondhand dress to a family event. People are going to think we don't take care of you. I wanted to scream that they literally didn't take care of me and hadn't bought me clothes in 3 years. Dad would complain to his friends about how expensive kids were while I sat there knowing I'd been financially independent since middle school. I expanded my business and started making real money doing lawn care and pet services for half the neighborhood. My parents acted like my success was somehow thanks to their tough love approach. See what happens when you stop enabling kids and make them work for what they want, Dad would tell people. She's learned the value of a dollar, unlike these spoiled brats whose parents just hand them everything. He said this while drinking $30 bottles of wine and playing golf at the country club. But then Dad got laid off from his job and suddenly their attitude toward money changed completely. We're going through a rough patch financially, Mom explained while asking if I could loan them money for groceries. Just until your father finds something new. I watched them panic about missing one mortgage payment while I'd been budgeting down to the penny for years. They had no savings despite making good money because they'd spent every dollar on wants instead of needs. You've got all that money just sitting in your account, Dad said when I refused to give them cash. Family helps family during hard times. I reminded him that family was supposed to help family when I was 13, and eating peanut butter for dinner every night. That was different because we were teaching you responsibility. Mom said like that made any sense. This is a real emergency. They kept asking for money every few days and getting angrier when I said no. You're being selfish and ungrateful after everything we've done for you, Dad said during one of his begging sessions. We could have kicked you out years ago, but we let you live here for free. I pointed out that letting your minor child live in your house was the legal minimum requirement for parents. Don't get smart with us when we're asking for help, Mom snapped back. I was counting my savings and planning to move out for college when both my parents cornered me in the kitchen with serious expressions. We've been talking, and we think it's time for you to start contributing to household expenses, Mom said while Dad nodded behind her. You're 15 now and you make good money, so it's only fair that you pay rent. Dad stepped closer with a contract in his hands. $500 a month plus utilities, or you can find somewhere else to live. I stare at the contract Dad's holding, and my mind goes completely blank for a second. The paper has official-looking headers and lines for signatures. $500 a month plus utilities means I'd be paying nearly everything I earn, leaving almost nothing for food or emergencies. I did the math in my head fast. Between my lawn care business and the pet sitting, I bring in about $600 on a good month. Utilities in this house run at least another $150 during summer when they blast the air conditioning. That would leave me $50 for everything else. Food, clothes, school supplies, gas for the mower, everything. My parents are watching me like they expect me to just sign. Mom has her arms crossed and Dad's holding out a pen. I tell them I need time to think about it and retreat to my room before they can argue. Dad calls after me about being dramatic, but I close my door and lock it. My hands shake as I pull out my budget notebook and run the numbers, confirming what I already know. This would destroy everything I've built. I've been so careful with every dollar for 3 years. I have $2,000 saved up for emergencies and college application fees. If I paid them rent, that savings would be gone in 4 months, and I'd have nothing left over for the basics they stopped providing. I write out different scenarios, but they all end the same way. There's no version where this works without me going hungry or losing my business equipment. The notebook pages blur a little because my eyes are watering, but I'm not crying. I'm just mad and scared and trying to figure out what to do. That night, I lie awake researching on my phone whether parents can legally charge their minor child rent. The answers are confusing and vary by state, but most sources say parents have a duty to provide basic support until 18. Some forums have people saying their parents charged them rent as teenagers and it was fine. Others say it's neglect if the parents aren't providing food and necessities. I find a legal aid website that says parents have to give kids shelter, food, clothing, medical care, and education. Charging rent might be okay if they're still providing all that other stuff. But my parents haven't bought me food in over a year. They haven't bought me clothes since I was 12. I screenshot everything that seems relevant and save it in a folder on my phone. Around 2 in the morning, I finally fall asleep with my phone still in my hand. When my alarm goes off, I feel exhausted and my eyes hurt from reading tiny text for hours. The next morning, I tell my parents I'm not signing anything until I talk to someone at the school about it. We're in the kitchen and they're eating breakfast they bought for themselves. Dad's face turns red and he starts yelling about disrespect. He says I'm being ungrateful and they have every right to charge me rent. Mom joins in saying I'm acting like a spoiled brat who thinks she's too good to help her own family. I stay calm even though my heart is pounding. I tell them I just want to make sure I understand everything before I sign a legal contract. Dad slams his coffee mug on the counter and coffee splashes everywhere. He starts toward me, but I grab my backpack and leave for school early. I hear him yelling behind me as I walk down the driveway, but I don't look back. My hands are shaking again as I unlock my bike. The ride to the school usually takes 15 minutes, but I do it in 10 because I'm pedaling so hard. I spend my morning classes barely paying attention, trying to figure out who I can trust with this. My math teacher is explaining something about equations, but I'm just staring at my notebook. In English, we're supposed to be doing group work, but I tell my group I don't feel good and sit by myself. The school counselor, Mr. Gilmore, has always been nice when I've seen her in the halls, so during lunch I walk to her office. The main office secretary asks if I have an appointment. I tell her it's kind of an emergency, and she looks at me for a second before picking up the phone. 5 minutes later, Mr. Gilmore comes out and brings me into her office. She's probably in her 40s with gray hair, and she's wearing a cardigan even though it's warm. Her office has plants on the windowsill and motivational posters on the walls. Mrs. Gilmore listens to everything without interrupting, and when I finish, she looks genuinely concerned. I tell her about being 13 when they stopped buying lunch and supplies, about working since middle school to afford food and clothes, about them ordering takeout while I ate peanut butter, about the locked pantry and the contract Dad wants me to sign. She writes things down in a notebook and nods. When I'm done talking, she asks if I feel safe at home and whether my parents have ever been physically violent, which they haven't. She asks if they've ever hit me or threatened to hurt me. I tell her no, they've never done that. They just stopped taking care of me financially, and now they want me to pay them. Mrs. Gilmore's expression gets more serious and she taps her pen on the desk. She explains that while she's not a lawyer, charging rent to a minor raises serious questions about parental obligations. She says parents are supposed to provide basic necessities until their kids turn 18. If they're charging rent but not providing food or clothes, that could be considered neglect. She opens a drawer and pulls out some pamphlets about free legal aid services. She asks if I'd be comfortable with her making some calls to get me connected with someone who can give real legal advice. I tell her yes, please. I need help figuring this out. Mrs. Gilmore picks up her phone and steps outside for a minute. Through the window in her door, I can see her talking to someone and writing things down. When she comes back, she tells me she left a message with legal aid, and they should call back within a day or two. I agree and feel this huge weight lift just from telling someone the truth. For 3 years, I've been handling everything alone and pretending it was normal. Having an adult actually listen and take me seriously makes me want to cry, but I hold it together. Mrs. Gilmore also helps me apply for free lunch right there in her office, which I should have done years ago but was too embarrassed. She pulls up the form on her computer and helps me fill it out. She says it's nothing to be ashamed of and lots of students use the program. The application asks about household income and family size. Mrs. Gilmore helps me explain that my parents don't provide food money even though they live in the house. She submits it electronically and says I should be approved within a few days. When I leave her office, I feel lighter than I have in months. Someone knows. Someone is helping. I'm not completely alone anymore. 2 days later, I meet with Boyd from Legal Aid, who explains that parents must provide food, shelter, and basic necessities to minor children. Mrs. Gilmore set up the meeting and drove me to the Legal Aid office downtown after school. Boyd is younger than I expected, maybe in his 30s, with glasses and a tie. His office is small with boxes of files stacked everywhere. He has me sit down and pulls out a yellow notepad. He asks me to start from the beginning and tell him everything. I go through the whole story again and he takes notes the entire time. When I get to the part about the rent contract, he stops writing and looks up. Charging rent could be considered neglect if it prevents them from meeting those obligations, he says. He explains that parents have a legal duty to support their minor children. They can't just decide to stop providing necessities and charge rent instead. Boyd asks detailed questions about what my parents do provide versus what I pay for myself. When I list everything, food, clothes, school supplies, toiletries, his expression gets more serious. He writes it all down in 2 columns labeled provided and not provided. The not provided column is way longer. He asks about their income and whether they're actually struggling financially or just choosing not to spend money on me. I tell him about the sports package and the golf membership and the restaurant meals, about how they had plenty of money until Dad got laid off a few months ago. Boyd nods and keeps writing. He asks if I have any proof of what I'm telling him. I show him the screenshots from my phone of their takeout orders piled up in the trash while my cabinets were empty. Photos of the locked pantry. My budget notebook showing every dollar I've earned and spent for 2 years. Boyd looks through everything carefully and his jaw gets tight. He closes the notebook and leans back in his chair. Boyd tells me this documentation is solid evidence and exactly what we need if things get worse. He explains that he can write a formal letter to my parents outlining their legal duties as parents of a minor child. The letter will cite specific state laws about providing food, shelter, clothing, and basic necessities. It won't force them to change their behavior, but it might make them realize they can't just kick me out or demand all my money. Boyd says the letter will be professional and factual, not threatening, but it will make clear that their actions could be considered neglect. He asks if I want him to send it, and I nod immediately. Having something official from a lawyer feels like protection I've never had before. Boyd prints out some information sheets about my rights and tells me to keep documenting everything. He also gives me his direct phone number in case things escalate quickly. The meeting ends with him promising to mail the letter within 2 days. That evening at home, I'm heating up ramen in the microwave when both my parents walk into the kitchen. They have that look on their faces again, the serious one that means they're about to corner